Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be ranking the final category of the Big Brother Canada seasons series, leading up to me eventually ranking the seasons, and this video is about me ranking the endgames of Big Brother Canada. I'm pretty sure I did this a few years ago where there are obviously less seasons, and my opinions have kind of changed on the endgames that I've already watched in prior seasons, so continue watching to find out. The timestamps for this video, the link to my social media, and all other information is down in the description. So let's just get right to it. So at 10th is BBCAN 11. This choice was very easy, and it's not because it's the freshest in my mind, or because it's the most recent. The endgame of the season starts with the double eviction, where Claudia wins HOH and decides to not nominate her showmans, as she nominates Daniel and Anika for eviction. Expecting Tai to not use the veto when he has been selfish gameplay-wise the entire season wasn't very smart, since he takes Anika off the block and sends Shania home, which causes the girly pups to cry their eyes off. Anika wins HOH and nominates Claudia and Renee, hoping that Tai won't do the same thing that he did with his own showmates in the double, since they all expected him to win the veto at this point. And of course, he does the exact same thing and Renee ends up going home, so Claudia only has him as an ally. The showmans dominates after this, and Tai easily steamrolls Claudia in the final vote. And it doesn't even matter about Anika and Daniel going home and what order they went home in. In general, there really was nothing enjoyable about the season at this point regarding the endgame, since it's a clear steamroll, everyone is playing around his comp wins, and the entertaining element of the season has long since passed by the point that the endgame takes place. At ninth is BBCAN 4. This was another very easy choice to have this season very low on the Endgamers category. I will say that the Endgame did start out pretty strongly, with Cassandra convincing Phil to not nominate her in the double, with the promise that she would not use the veto, but one, Cassandra did end up winning the veto, which was shocking in itself, but she used the veto on Tim, ruining the brothers' plans as Nikki went home. This caused for a tense endgame, as the brothers and Kelsey attacked Tim and Cassandra pretty hard at the final 5 round in a very cringy argument. They were nominated, and Joel made a mistake in the veto competition, where his game just spiraled out of control to the point that the pair was kept over him, despite the events of the week in the beginning. By this point, the lack of studying by Tim, Cassandra, and Joel really kicked to bite them in the butt here, where it paid off for the brothers and Kelsey, since they studied for weeks, and the rest of the season was just a steamroll, with Cassandra and Tim, the latter who essentially quit because he flopped at the second part of the final HOH, were picked off, and the brothers end up winning over Kelsey, which was somewhat controversial at the time, since people felt like Kelsey should have won, which says a lot about the brothers, or a little about them, because she was evicted and returned. Yeah. And at 8, I have Big Brother Canada 3. And in general, I was stuck between this season and 2 other seasons, between where I rank them getting their endgames. I feel like this season is the worst in that regard, since all the juice was out of the season by the time of the endgame completely. Sarah wins HOH, and Zach runs out of cat lives as he's on his 9th life, and he is essentially sent home very easily in this round. The final double eviction of the season happens here, where Brittany ends up winning HOH, and Ashley continues her veto streak, causing Pilar to go home. Sarah wins HOH again, and Ashley is the target again, but she wins the veto, and Brittany doesn't have any more lives either, since her cat lives are gone, so she goes home here. The final 3 in itself is pretty unpredictable with who could win, since apparently each of them had one scenario where they could win, but watching the final 3 was just not very interesting. Godfrey makes the worst choice for his game by booting Ashley, and Sarah easily beats him. In general, the season was running on very little themes by the time we got to the endgame, so while it isn't a pain in the butt to watch, like the 2 below it, there really isn't anything good about it either. At 7th is Big Brother Canada 2. A part of me is, and is not shocked that the endgame is ranked in this position, and it was not in my intention to put most of the early seasons this low in this category. By this point in time, it was clear that John and Netta were in full control of the game, and it was clear that someone was going to drag Sabrina to the end. Rachel goes home against Sabrina on Adele's HOH, and while there's some back and forth between Sabrina and Adele, there wasn't a whole lot happening at this point. John wins the next HOH and intends to take out Heather. Most of the house is actually planning this, but she wins the veto and escapes her eviction by a round, and Adele unceremoniously goes home. You see the tension between Netta and John start around this point in the season, as he realizes how self-interested Netta is with how she handled Adele's eviction, and while we knew that she was going to cut him at third, no one knew that he was going to cut her at third, so seeing him do it was actually shocking. John of course steamrolls Sabrina, and I will say that while this endgame itself is pretty boring, there were some decent moments that does make it watchable. So at sixth, I have BBCAN 1, and I just realized that I ranked the first four seasons of this show at pretty much the bottom. I am shocked that this is the highest category that I ever gave BBCAN 1 regarding certain points in this season, but it does make sense in hindsight, since the endgame is usually what people speak of the most regarding the season. This portion of the season starts with the second double eviction, where Topaz is easily sent home after Emmett convinces Peter to not veto her. Ultimately, we have Jillian winning HOH, and she actually gets her way for once over Emmett in getting Peter out of the house, and the relationship between Andrew and Tala starts to fall apart here. And Emmett has his last cheating meltdown happening here. The second Final Five happens when Gary returns to the house via Canada's vote, and Emmett uses this to his advantage, so Andrew can get booted, which Jillian did not want. More Andrew and Tala bickering happens, and the both of them are easily booted at this point. Gary ends up booting Emmett at the final three, which some saw as shocking, and then we have the infamous final two, where Jillian accidentally wins due to Topaz being too petty to not realize what fault she was placing in the socket. Literally, this is classic reality TV, and there's nothing like it anywhere. Outside of the moment, there are a few watchable moments that make the endgame not a complete bore, but I hate that Gary returned in what was the final four. At fifth is Big Brother Canada 6. I initially had this at third in this category, but then I really had to look at the triple to realize why I bumped it so high in the first place, and outside of that, there really isn't much to this endgame in comparison to the others, so I bumped it this low. Ultimately, the triple eviction in this regard, at least in the elements that fit into the endgame, was pretty boring since it's just Johnny and Olivia easily getting booted, where the interesting stuff about this triple happened in the final 8, actually. Kayla ends up winning HOH. The trio are plotting on how to take out Derek on her HOH, but Derek pulls a fast one on Will in the veto competition, so it ruins that plan. Paris and Will ganged up on Maddie during that week several times, which is uncomfortable to watch, and Maddie obviously goes home here, where a part of her kind of wants to go home. Anyways, Will goes home in the final four very easily, and Paris winning the final HH was pretty shocking, but she ended up booting Derek. And we also see herself and Kayla shouting their answers at the jurors, where Paris wins over Kayla, which was controversial at the time. There's some decent-ish moments, but in general, it just doesn't have many, if any, highs, but it doesn't really have the lows of other endgames, hence it being roughly around the middle. At fourth is Big Brother Canada 9. The endgames from this point onwards are pretty solid, so I am kind of picking hairs from this point onwards. We have one of the most infamous final 6 rounds here, where everyone plays extremely poorly, with Tara almost ruining her move of sending Jetson home by nominating Brayden as the replacement nominee, Jetson winning the veto and using it on Beth, both Beth and Tashawn sending him home and handling it so poorly, and I don't even remember what Kiefer was doing here, but I'm sure he did something wrong as well. Tara was immediately sent home after her HOH, though the fake double eviction happened here, which was pretty interesting in how they handled it. And she had to compete against Jetson to come back in the house. Brayden decides to wake up and wins both the HOH and the veto that week, and he sends Beth home, who has a bunch of fights with Tashawn, which was just hilarious, though very stupid on his part with how he handled her eviction. The rest of the season kind of peters out from this point onwards, with Kiefer being a dead man walking, though it wasn't the best move for Tara to boot him at that point, and of course Tara ends up leaving again, where Tashawn beats Brayden. It's definitely the weakest portion of the season, but it's pretty strong overall. The bronze prize of third regarding the endgame goes to Big Brother Canada 7. OMG, a category that BBCAN 7 is not low on, and it really isn't shocking, but it happened by luck. The endgame started just as boringly as all the other parts of the season started, as Dane nominates two of the remaining non-pretty boys to send Damien home in the double. Kira ends up winning the next HOH, and no one expected that to happen, as it forces the pretty boys to target one another around early. Everyone is essentially against Adam at this point, and he snaps when Kira nominates him, and Adam really shows his butt here, and Anthony ends up going at it with Adam, though Adam ends up crying in Anthony's arms, and they all have a nice kumbaya moment. Adam saves himself with the veto, and Dane is the replacement nominee, where it seems like Dane is a for sure goner at this point. Dane manages to pull some magic, and despite being the biggest threat, he ends up staying over the weak liability in Mark. Dane wins the following HOH and targets Adam, who thinks that the pretty boys will go to the end together, and he has a crying meltdown once they tell him that he's getting the boot. Honestly, it's really only this high due to the final 5 round and seeing Adam's karma, but it's one of the only somewhat interesting elements of the season. And of course, Dane ends up beating Anthony at the end, and Kira is obviously the third placer that they were meant to be the entire season. The silver prize of second goes to Big Brother Canada 5. This one was very tough, and I did consider putting it at the top of the list pertaining to the endgame, but I just couldn't do it. This portion of the season starts off great, as the triple eviction was when Dre's game blew up, and seeing her react to it and call out Dylan while trying to do damage control was great TV, which brought some life into this late portion of the season. The final 5 was essentially Kevin versus Micah again, as he nominates them both for eviction again. Micah tells Dylan and Karen to send her home over Dimitri, and Karen ends up vetoing her after she cursed him off a few days prior and told him off at the ceremony seconds earlier, and ruining his room, because he was so sure that this would cause Dimitri to go home. But it didn't happen, as Karen was set on screwing Kevin, so bye bye Dylan. Ultimately, nothing else in the season really mattered, since Kevin won all the remaining competitions, booted the showman, and was the first unanimous BBCAN winner against Karen. There was a lot of fun stuff within the endgame, but Kevin steamrolling through it competitions, or via competitions, just put it at second in this category for me. And the gold prize first goes to Big Brother Canada 10. A part of me is shocked that the season is first in this category, but it really isn't shocking once you think things through. The endgame started off very well, as we had the triple eviction, where Josh turned on Summer and Betty in a pretty cold way, where he showed that he was with Kevin and Helena, and Summer's just laying into Josh. And while the eviction is happening, JC Lynn is still reeling over Gino's eviction, and she goes at it with Helena, which was just great to watch. After Summer and Marty go home, Betty wins HOH, which shocks people, and she nominates Josh and JC Lynn, where there was a lot of back and forth about who would go home, as Josh seemed to have woken up against the dominating duo, and JC Lynn kicks up her game a lot, but she still ends up going home. Despite all that, Josh goes back in the control of Kevin, and he essentially wins out throughout the season, but he ends up taking out Helena over Kevin, which is dumb, and he cut Betty in the finale, which was a huge blow. Kevin ends up winning over Josh, and there's definitely a lot of fun elements in the endgame, and it was pretty unpredictable. Or elements of it was unpredictable, and it was pretty cool to see Kevin win and control the season with only winning one competition. Alrighty, so that concludes my coverage of the Big Brother Canada Endgamers. And my coverage of Big Brother Canada in general regarding the seasons is coming to an end very soon. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to compile all the lists that I made about the elements of a season. I'm going to look into each season, pretty much add all the categories together and divide it so I can have a median. And based on the median scores, I will rank all of the Big Brother Canada seasons, and the video will be a very long one. That should be out in a few days, so look out for that. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Take care.